Wolfpack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of RotoStreet, rotostreetjournal.com. We breed and feed fantasy wolves here with your Saturday DFS optimal lineup and optimal strategy, specifically for Draftkings. That's the only place I personally play, especially true after apparently all hell broke loose on FanDuel last weekend. I personally don't play there at all, but it seemed like an absolute chaos fire. So I'm going to keep my money on Draftkings, and I'm going to keep going at it. Last week was not our best, but first 4 weeks we've been running pretty hot. So, unfortunately, some down weeks, but we're going to get right back in the saddle, bring you right back. Let me know, of course, any questions you have for week 5, whether they're daily fantasy related or sit starts, anything you need. I will hit an open mailbag at the end of the show. But for now, we'll go about 15, 20 minutes with some DFS optimal lineup and strategy. I kind of want to make a tradition here to start with just analyzing the previous week's Millie Maker. And we've seen some real trends. And this one was actually a little different than what we've noticed on the previous Millie Makers. We had, of course, a big team stack with the Chiefs. So Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. It all, 5 for 5 now, have stacked 2 weapons in the same offense with their starting quarterback. The only difference here was they didn't go double receiver. Most lineups have been double receiver so far. This one clearly was a receiver and then a tight end. But obviously, Kelsey's essentially a wide receiver at the position. They also didn't run it back. There's no Raiders on here. And you saw the Raiders obviously put up 40 points, but there wasn't like a clear cut. Maybe you could run it back with Josh Jacobs, something of that nature. It clearly didn't matter. The other big difference with this lineup and some others, you notice there was a 29% and 30% chalk play in here. Almost, 30, just about 30%. And this lineup still ended up making the millie. So it goes to show you can have some chalk for sure. I mean, 2 of literally the highest owned players on the slate were in this lineup. But we also see you got to balance that out if you're going to do it. You got to find that one gem for the millie, of course. We're, obviously different types of single entries and things, which I recommend more than the millie. But you see 1.2% here with Claypool obviously was the play of the week with 45.6 points. And also that ugly Devonta Freeman play, who we called last week, 16 points at 4.4% owned and 4.6 salary, ended up being a nice little bargain and under 5%. So they did have some chalk. They kind of ran that back with getting 2 under 5% plays with, again, Claypool being that millie maker. But again, just some similar trends here too. 2 weapons from the quarterback, 2 sub 5% plays, a little bit of chalk. This one more chalky than usual, but ultimately a lot of similar trends to what we see. And let's go back now into some of those trends and talk about the biggest pretty much difference to win a millie or not. And that's picking the right game. You find the game that goes completely bananas. And this week, you always, good practice, pretty standard practice is checking the over-unders. What is Vegas looking at that could go completely crazy this week? The highest over-unders are the Falcons and Vikings and Lions and Jags, both 54.5. I went all in on the Falcons game last week, Panthers-Falcons. Ultimately, it did okay. Bridgewater, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and some Mike Davis on the quadruple stack did okay. All of them hit pretty well. The thing is that game could have gone completely bananas, but we didn't get it on the other side. So all those guys had about 20 fantasy points at the half. So it's just one of those what if the Falcons kept pace. I do think they keep pace this week with the Vikings because they get Julio Jones back, 2 horrendous secondaries, new coach coming in. So we saw that fire up the defense of the Texans. Raheem Morris is a defensive guy, but I just don't think they have the firepower to fire up that Atlanta Falcons defense. So I think we get a back and forth bonanza between the Falcons and Vikings. Love attacking that game. I love attacking the Texans and Titans, 53.5. I think that hits the over by a long shot. I think the Titans themselves will put up 40. We're going to talk about them in a second. So I love attacking that game. The Texans definitely seem to have a bit more offensive prowess with B.O.B. gone. Shocker, right? But a lot more play action, 29% play action, a lot more deep shots. I could see the Texans, Titans getting themselves into a nice back and forth shootout. Lions, Jags, tied with the Falcons, Vikings at 54.5. I don't know that I love that one. Just like I faded the Jags last week, that Jags whoever they're chasing. It was the Bengals, whatever that game was. No, that was a couple weeks ago. I ended up fading the Jags because I just didn't buy that one. Jags Houston, rather, was it? And it ended up working out okay. Cooks went nuclear, but I'm not going to go all in on this Lions Jags game. I do like the Packers Bucks. That between the Falcons and Vikings, Texans, Titans, and then Packers Bucks at 54. I like that over. I could see a nice Brady Rodgers duel. Those two should be fired up. We've seen Rodgers fold against Brady, but this year is the year of Rodgers. So I ultimately think those two go back and forth. Nice 4:00 game to get some firepower as well. A lot of underowned guys coming in that game. So let's go into now my favorite. Oh, I got to get my mic down here. What am I doing? Hopefully you guys could hear that okay. Feel free to comment in if not, but hopefully this sounds a little bit better audio-wise. My fault on that. The mic was just floating up in space. But let's go into now my favorite stacks of the week. Game stacking, as we just said, is a crucial part. You don't win if you don't pick the right game, right quarterback, right weapons. So ultimately, let's look at some of these options for week 6 here. So my again, Falcons Vikings, one of my favorite games to target, and I like the cheap play of Cousins. Matt Ryan at 6.6, not bad, and he's supposed to be right under 3% ownership. He's been shitting his pants, so that could be a nice contrarian play. But I like Cousins at 6.1. Honestly, could light it up. Then you got Thielen to run that back with. Obviously, my favorite wide receiver play of week 6. I love him at 7,300. He's going to be locked into my lineups regardless of whether I have Cousins or not. I think he's going to smash for 2 touchdowns. He also got Jefferson, though, at 6,000 right on the other side. Could be a great stack. And one of my favorite values of the week, Irv Smith Jr., coming off his career best day, or at least season best, I think career best as well, like 60 yards, 4 catches, coming in at the bare minimum, 2.5K. So I like both those guys. You obviously get the Ridley run it back at 7,800. He should destroy this secondary. So that to me seems like a game ripe with wide receiver duels. So I like that one a lot to go back and forth. You could also go Julio for a nice contrarian one. We'll talk about some sub 5% guys, but Julio coming in at some really low ownership, underpriced, under Ridley, and could totally outscore him. So an intriguing pivot. I like a pair of 5.9K quarterbacks the best this week, though. And that's where I'm pretty much structuring all my lineups. One of them being Fitzmagic. You obviously stack him with Parker. I mean, 17 targets a fucking week, it seems like. It's just Parker. He gets a nice zone defense with the Jets. He's going to eat them up. The nice Gase revenge narrative, too. Parker finally unlocked away from Gase. Ultimately, a nice narrative that I buy into, similar to Gesicki. I love that duo. And then, of course, you can have the run it back with Jamison Crowder, maybe the most underappreciated person in fantasy football right now. I even just tweeted this out before going live, but the dude is second in yards per game right now. I mean, actually first in yards per game, 111, has been over 100 in all 3 games he's played, over 7 catches, all 3 games he's played. Second in fantasy points per game at 22.5. Only Devontae Adams, who missed 2 games, has more points per game right now than Jamison Crowder. He comes in at 6,100. A great smash spot against the awful corner coverage of the slot, specifically Nick. I forget the guy's exact name, but complete joke coverage coming out of the slot there for the Jets. I think the Dolphins are going to get up big. The only reason I'm not all in on this stack with Fitzmagic and Parker, and again, loving Crowder regardless of what I do, is because I really like Myles Gaskin. We're going to talk about a little bit later. I feel like they could get a huge lead, dominate the Jets, and the points might not have to come through Fitzmagic in the air, could come on the ground with Gaskin. And so that being said, my favorite, and I think the ownership is going to be lower than I expected because there's a great Fitzmagic 5.9, is Tannehill. I love me some Tannehill this week, and pretty much any week. The Titans are a steam-rolling offense right now. Ridiculous pace. In terms of how many points they put up a game. They had that dud in week 1 against the Broncos. And ever since then, 42, 31, 33 points in their last 3 games. Just like last year, they were just the new steamrolling offense as soon as Tannehill came over. And there's that, they have to regress in the red zone. Everybody's saying they're too good. I think Arthur Smith is just a genius. I've said that before on the show, and I'll keep saying it. One of the best offensive minds in football. When you combine that with the discipline and just kind of fired up like Mike Vrabel element that he brings, it's a beautiful marriage. And I think the Titans are for real. I think they're going to come in and put up 40 on the Texans. And in that process, all their fantasy products are going to be worthwhile. I think AJ Brown at 5'6", chalkiest receiver of the week, and I think it makes sense. The dude should be 7K. The Bradley Roby, I get that shadow concern. A lot of people bringing him up in that conversation for shadow, alongside James Bradbury, Josh Norman, not Josh Norman, that's Stephon Gilmore. I'm talking Josh Norman. But they're saying, he's in that level, Bradley Roby, and that has people kind of fading AJ Brown chalk. I buy all in because he's not going to see him all day. We saw Thielen destroy Roby. It's not like he is just this monster that will completely take him out on an island. And they have really no one else to throw to besides Jonnu. So I love AJ Brown to see a nice 8 to 10 targets and light it up. Again, the number one receiver to close out last season, saw a nice target hog game in his return, gets his feet under him. I think he's just going to keep rolling from here on out. Jonnu, of course, one of the best tight end plays in season long and in DFS all year. 5-2, completely bargain for him. 5 touchdowns in only 4 games. And he's going to score this week, maybe 2. So I love him to make a bunch of house calls alongside Derrick Henry. And that's where I might differentiate a bit is Henry's chalky, AJ Brown's chalky, but I don't think very many lineups are going to stack Tannehill, Brown, and Henry. And I think I'm just going to roll with it. We saw someone win $1 million last year when the Titans faced the Chiefs. It's not like Henry can't rip a big screen for a touchdown. We haven't seen it yet this year, but we saw plenty of those last year. So I love a Tannehill, Henry, Brown stack. Just Titans in general. Get them on in your lineup. They're going to plaster the Texans. And I think the Texans have the firepower to keep up. So that ultimately, who do you run that back with? Brandon Cooks at 5K seems great. I think Will Fuller is going to be a little bit less owned because he had a relative dud, 60 yards and a TD. Nice day for the guy. I could see him getting right back to Will Fuller 100-yard TD type numbers with them playing from behind, especially if the top corners are going to be out for the Titans. So those are my favorite game stacks. Let me know what you think. My favorite contrarian stack of the week, just for like those DraftKings, Millie Maker, you need those under-owned guys. I love Cam Newton coming in under 5% owned at 6.5K. And then Damiere Byrd coming in at 2% owned. My favorite bargain receiver of the week, 3.5K. You could also go Edelman as a nice pivot away from the chalk of AJ Brown. I love this stack. I think, the Broncos are one of the clearest pass funnel defenses. Their run D, the lowest points allowed to running backs and the 5th most points allowed to quarterbacks. 5th most to wide receivers, definitely getting destroyed through the air while stymieing the ground attack. So I think Cam Newton, the Patriots are going to recognize that. They're going to attack them at their weaknesses. And I think Damiere Byrd could be that play to stack along with Cam Newton. Get yourself a nice under-owned one. Watch Cam run in 2 scores, throw for another 2, and win you $1 million because nobody else played him coming off the COVID here. So those are my 3 biggest stacks, and then my contrarian play of the week. Again, let me know what your thoughts are. Let's talk about a little chalk. One justice. I forgot to take the banners off. I'm still learning. There we go. Much better when the banners are taken off. Learning every time as we get better and better at this. So let's talk about some chalk and who we're eating. The players we're eating, as Xenos would love to say. And then which ones we're going to fade and pivot away from. So running back, Madison's by far the chalkiest play of any position. And it makes sense. Atlanta gives up a ton to everything, to every position, most receiving points on the ground. But what's interesting about them, I love this from Fantasy Points over in Scott Barrett's Bargains article. He mentions that, yes, Atlanta very susceptible to everything, including running backs, especially through the air, but they're also giving up, I think, the 6th or 7th fewest sheer rushing totals or rushing points. So it's running backs that are killing them as pass catchers. Madison is definitely a capable pass catcher. He could rip them up through the air. The thing is I'm going kind of all in on my Thielen, Irv Smith Jr. stack, and going to the air game and thinking Cousins just bombs them for, 3 touchdowns. Madison could have a great day, nice, 100 total yards, maybe finds the end zone, but still underwhelm given the ownership numbers. And Derrick Henry comes in $100 cheaper, but it's going to be, or $100 more, but only $100 more. I mean, you can afford that, and is going to be less owned than Madison, facing the most generous run D in the league. They're going to steamroll them. just like any running back against Texans has been money making. And Derrick Henry, the biggest pure steamroller in the league. Like, come on, give me him at 25% any day over Madison at 30%. So I'm going to pivot away from Madison for week 6 chalk. But the biggest pivot of all would be Aaron Jones. Coming in at under 10% ownership projections, more expensive than both guys, probably the result of those low ownership numbers. But would anybody be shocked if at 4 o'clock Aaron Jones breaks the slate with like a 45-point day against the Bucs, who have been they're typically a very good run D, but they're right in the middle of the pack this year in points allowed. So Aaron Jones, an interesting pivot to get away from those extremely chalky high-priced backs, gives you that elite ceiling of those high-priced guys, but at the lower ownership. So that's an interesting pivot in my mind. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to eat the A.J. Brown chalk pretty much in all my lineups, maybe fade him for one because that Roby coverage, you never know. But you do get that Edelman, same price point, could go for 10 catches against this Broncos team. I don't think the Broncos keep it that competitive, to be honest, but could happen. And then you got McLaurin at 5,700. Will draw James Bradbury, but he also thrived drawing that, Baltimore secondary. I believe he hung a huge stat line up week 2, drawing some shadow coverage of Darius Slay. So, McLaurin can get it done in tough matchups. I still like A.J. Brown more. I still think A.J. Brown's going to go bananas, but I can see why people would fade him. As again, you can only have up to 2, I would say, 20% or more ownership. So if you want A.J. Brown to be off and take one of the running back guys, I see that. I totally understand. But in that light, I'm going to go A.J. Brown over Montgomery. I find a lot of flex decisions are coming down to that. He's looking at 20% as well, Montgomery. I get the Carolina matchup. It's tasty, but it's also David Montgomery. And anybody that's tuned into this show knows I think he's a box of Krispy Kremes, just empty calories. Had a nice Thursday night game, but I will never recommend Montgomery, especially if I could have A.J. Brown's upside instead. Here come 3 touchdowns for David Montgomery, but that's where I'm fading him. And then Mike Davis, it's always a risky fade at this point. He's had over 20 points every single week. The Bears, if you're going to beat them, come through the running backs. You saw Ronald Jones just pounding that team. They are not good in terms of run D. So I could see Mike Davis just, again, 20% owned, 20-something fantasy points. Nice day. I like him far more than any of the receivers there this week. They've been very limiting, Chicago has, against wide receivers, specifically slots. So definitely against DJ Moore this week. Robbie Anderson will probably do his thing, but I'm not going there. Certainly other receiver plays I like more. It's always risky to fade Mike Davis. I find myself doing it this week. Again, I'm all in on Henry as my high-priced guy, and then there's a couple cheaper running back plays I like more. So that's the projected chalk for the week. We got Matt Stafford coming in as the highest owned quarterback. Like I said, Tannehill all day for me at a cheaper price. Fitzmagic at a cheaper price, both all day for me. And if I'm going to Stafford and I want to be contrarian instead, give me the 200 extra bucks, get me to Cam Newton, watch him do his thing and outscore Stafford by a healthy amount. So that's the expected chalk. And Galladay expected to be after A.J. Brown. Galladay is expected to be the highest owned guy at 6,200. Love it, of course, but I will be fading that for A.J. Brown. If I can only have one chalky receiver in my lineup, I'm going to make it AJB and not Galladay. So that is our chalk talk. Let us know again if you think I'm crazy, if there's any pivots. But let's now move into our bargain segment of the week. My bargains of the week, Phillip Lindsay, obvious. But at 4.3K, the guy's going to go absolutely ham. He's got no Melvin Gordon this week. I think the Pats run D is pretty overrated. The risk is, of course, that they get down the Broncos big early, and then Lindsay kind of gets flowed out. But he's coming back after 4 or 5 weeks off from that foot, the turf toe. And I think at full steam, full workload, Lindsay thrives in these types of situations. So I could see him definitely hitting that 100-yard bonus, finding the end zone at 4-3, 13 to 15 touches minimum in my mind. At that price is just so tough to pass up. I wonder what the ownership will be. It should be pretty high, but we've also seen owners have not been adjusting to news all that crazily this year. So I like him a lot. I think he's the RB bargain play. But if you wanted to pivot away, bare minimum, both Jets. I think Gore, of course, a bet to find the end zone, as ugly as it will be. It's kind of like Freeman last week. Nobody's like, I'm going to win $1 million with Gore in my lineup until he gets you like an ugly 15, 16 points at bare minimum price. That's how you do it. But I also like LaMichael Pirine there, Pirine, however you say it, because I think they're going to get down big early. They're going to need to dink dunk up the field. And I think they're going to put him, Pirine, in those situations. Adam Gase, as horrible as he is as a coach, did say it's critical for us to get Pirine involved this week. We can't just put the full load on Gore at his age. So moving forward, he said he's expecting a much bigger role for LaMichael. So I'm big into him as a stash. It's going to take some stones to put him into your DFS, but that's what it's going to take on $1 million with both those guys coming in under 5% owned. And I also like, if you want to fade that Jags-Lions game, ugly AP, 100 yards. Like, what if this just becomes a gross ground battle between James Robinson and AP? Nobody's really talking about that, but the Jags run D is horrendous. So I could see AP, they're going to want to feed him 20-something carries every week, it seems. Maybe that ends up being the play at 4,700, gets you to fade away from all the chalk on Galladay and Stafford, and the benefit from the AP going to 100 and maybe finding the end zone. You could get 20 points out of AP this week at 4.7. So he's also an intriguing play, in my opinion. Now, not like a huge bargain, not under 5K, which is what we usually have as a threshold, but I just want to emphasize Myles Gaskin this week, 5.4. I mean, that's just it's sincere underprice by this guy. The biggest reason because Jordan Howard, healthy scratch last week. I wish this game was at 1 p.m., not because there's only 2 fucking 4 p.m.s and the Jets fucking Dolphins is one of them. Hideous. But more so because I'd hate to see Jordan Howard back involved and vulture it. The reason I'm so high on Gaskin is 5 goal line carries last week with the healthy scratch of Jordan Howard, pounded in 1. I think whoever's the goal line guy this week, including Fitzmagic, is a great bet to run in for at least 1, if not 2 scores. Gaskin, with them bleeding the clocks, I think the Dolphins get up big early. Love a Gaskins Dolphins defense running back stack. I think they'll pick 6. Joe Flacco, I think they're going to sack him all day with no Becton in at left tackle. The Dolphins could generate more pressure than you'd expect from that team. We saw they just completely got inside Jimmy Garoppolo's head. I think they're going to do the same exact thing. So 2,900, love me some Dolphins defense, and then running that back with Myles Gaskin as they bleed clock, getting up to 100 yards rushing, 4 to 5 catches, TD. You're looking at a nice 20-something point day at a severe bargain price. I mentioned this guy at the top, Damiere Byrd, 3,500. Definitely my top 6 wide receiver bargain on the slate. Again, the Broncos 5th most points to wide receivers and quarterbacks, the lowest to running backs. So that's a clear-cut pass funnel. And we've gotten some great involvement from Damiere Byrd the last few weeks. So I definitely think he could be, if I'm going to punt wide receiver at all this week, it's going to be with him. He's run routes, 95% of the passing downs he's been in. He's been seeing a healthy share of targets. So he'll be out there. He'll be running routes. It's a matter of how many does he see, but at 3,500, he just needs to get, 4 or 5 catches, maybe clear 70 yards. And then if he finds the end zone, you got yourself a ridiculous deal. It also, too, with Julian Edelman banged up, we'll see they had the week off to kind of get healthy, rest up, but he had that knee does not look good. So ultimately, if Edelman is dinged up again and Byrd kind of keeps becoming that number 1 at 3.5, that's going to be a sick bargain. And also, we've also seen some ancillary wide receivers, Corey Davis, Chase Claypool, Scotty Miller, Jeff Smith, all going for double digits against this Broncos team. They've done decent against number 1s, but then those number 2s, 17, 11.3, 15, you could probably get that from Byrd this week. And at 3.5, that's going to be a slate changer. I also like Fulgham under 5%. It seems like nobody wants to believe in him. Everybody all in on Claypool. And as I am, 5,200 this week. Claypool's in my lineups. But Fulgham, 4,400. And he could just go right back and do it again. We got no Deshaun Jackson, no Alshon Jeffrey. And I think this Baltimore secondary, we've seen him get exposed a couple weeks in a row. He's got such Fulgham, great contested catch rates that even if he's not fully separating, he can get the job done. And Wentz obviously trusted him last week. I think he could go right back to his boy. And I could see Fulgham after a game-winning touchdown and then after a 10 target, 10 catch, like 150-yard day, again being a nice bargain play. At tight end, I love me some Irv Smith Jr., and anybody should. 2,500, any weapon at a bare minimum price against the Falcons is always worth noting. Never mind a good freak athlete like Irv, who's coming off his best professional day. 4 catches, 60 yards, finally involved in 70% of the offensive routes. That's what we've been waiting for. So I love me some Irv. I think this is the week he finally finds the end zone with that increased involvement. And at the bare minimum price, you're getting, 20-point upside. Anybody against the Falcons. The worst in terms of adjusted fantasy points against to tight ends. Second in terms of sheer points allowed to only the Saints. Give me that all day. Bare bottom price. And then Trey Burton, no Mo Alley Cox. He already saw, the most targets and routes since he came back, Trey Burton. And you remove that big end zone factor of Mo Alley Cox. This could be the week that Burton not only sees the targets and the receptions, but also finds the end zone at 3,100, and nobody's going to own him. So that could be an interesting play as well. Let's now talk about, let me get the banner off. Our sub 5% plays. So essentially building off our pivots from earlier. But as we've seen, these low ownership guys have been making the lineups for them. Claypool last week and Freeman. We saw Mixon the week before at 3.8%. The weekend before that, Jeff Wilson and Burkhead, both under 3% owned, were dominating his punts. And then we've seen a couple, Indy D was the only punt in week 2 at 3%. But Kelsey was right around 5% as well. Week 1 had 3 sub 5s at Rodgers, 2.6%, Lazard 2.9%, and Greg Olsen 3.4%. So there tends to be at least one, if not 2, under 5% guys in lineups. So we're going to look at some potential candidates for who that could be in week 6. Now, Aaron Jones is looking right around 7-8%. So he's not going to be under 5%. So I guess he doesn't totally fit this bill, but I just want to keep reiterating, everyone's going to be going to Henry and or Madison and or Davis. Aaron Jones by far projected for, a third of the ownership of those guys and could easily outscore everybody. How many times have we seen him go 45 or more? The Bucs D is decent, but I want to just reemphasize, if you want to pivot away from those top running backs, Aaron Jones is by far the top pivot. But I love this one. Julio Jones, under 7K, 6,700. He's facing a D giving up the 5th most points to wide receivers. Just horrible secondary. And he's also under 5%. I mean, most weeks, if you saw Julio lining up against one of the worst secondaries in the league, he'd be 7-8, the price that Ridley is right now. This is a decent way. Ridley's going to be right around 15% ownership or so. This is a good way to pivot off that, to stack that game, and get the guy that could end up going 150 and 2. Like, we've seen Julio. How many times have we seen him go 200 yards? Like, this Vikings D could be it. Now, you could also get a hamstring. He's out limping on the sideline, but that's why he's going to be 5% owned, and that's why he could break a big tournament slate. I also love the Bucs receivers, both coming in under 5% owned projections, especially intrigued by the returning Godwin. Jair Alexander, very legit for the Packers. My expectation is he's going to trail with Mike Evans, who's dinged up. So I'll probably fade away from Evans, but I love going in at Godwin, 6,400. That mid-priced wide receivers from like 5.5 to 7 is so tough to pick out the right ones. I think that the under-owned plays, the pivots, are going to be coming from this wide receiver crop. And I think Godwin could be a great one to go for, 10 catches, 100 in a TD that nobody ends up owning. So that's an intriguing play. We talked about some of those bargains, but also hideous Marvin Jones. Like Brandon Cooks last week, everybody has been expecting the breakout of these veterans. They don't come. Everyone ignores them. And then suddenly, bam, you get 160 in a TD from Cooks. Why not Marvin Jones this week? The price is pretty ugly. 5-1. I don't love it. But you got Golladay coming in so chalky. You got Claypool, probably 20% owned. LaVisca, 15 or so percent. And right at the same price as Marvin Jones. So to pivot away from Golladay and Claypool and LaVisca, what if he just goes 140-2, as we've often seen? We know how bad that Jags defense is. So someone's going to go off. Again, it could be AP too. I love the AP pivot as well from that whole game script. But Marvin Jones definitely could be the guy that you pivot away from. And we talked then again about those bargains, but Bird and Edelman, not necessarily a bargain, but I love those Pats receivers against the Broncos to stack with Cam. And then you got Rodgers, the top priced guy, coming in at 3% alongside Robert Tonyan, 3%. I think that game is going to have its points. And with so much under-owned guys coming from it, you're going to see that slate really change by whoever gets the right plays in that game. Even if it could be Scotty Miller at a bargain. But somebody's going to tilt the entire slate because that game will go nuts later. Rodgers versus Brady. It could be Rodgers himself throwing a Tonyan at 3%. And those guys just going completely insane. Alrighty, guys. That's all I got for my picks and plays of the week. My optimal lineup, again, would be a Tannehill stack with A.J. Brown. I'll eat that A.J. Brown chalk along with Henry because I think those Titans are going to go crazy. I'm saving the money at tight end, going Irv Smith Jr., and then packing that game with Thielen to really emphasize the passing and kind of fade that Alex Madison chalk that we're going to see. I'll run that back with Ridley or Julio if I want to be a little more contrarian there. And then I'm just sneaking Claypool in at 5,200. No Deontay Johnson. And the Jets D, the Dolphins D with Myles Gaskin. Love that defensive running back stack right there. That would be my optimal lineup. Let me know what plays you love. Let's get to your questions and comments here. See what you got. Have to pick two. Hollywood, Claypool, Jay Jeff. Ooh, some great options for Charlie here. Dare I say we bench Hollywood here? I feel like I got to go with the rookies in great matchups. Brown's not threatening, and we got Deontay ruled out. Jefferson against the Atlanta team we just keep raving about. I feel like Claypool might be my lock here. I think he just keeps rolling, Charlie. It comes down to Jefferson versus Hollywood, and I think I bench Hollywood there. My man, Mike Clay, great to see you as always. Pick wide receiver 2 and 3 flex. Parker, Lamb. So I'm going to have Parker and then Claypool definitely in. From there, it gets trickier because Chark's probably going to sit. I don't really want him in either, dinged up. Lamb, you have, the concern is he going to keep getting it done with the red rifle, Dalton there? I think he does. But let me lock in Parker, wide receiver 2, Claypool first, flex. Love Ronald Jones, especially if Fournette sits this week. That could be the guy at that, again, we talk about that game. Low ownership across the board, despite it being the potential highest blowout game. Not blowout, just shootout game between the Packers and the Bucks. So Rojo, a great way to get points in that action. I like him. And then it comes down to Lamb or Gibson for me. I think I might let Gibson find the bench this week. Let's see him get it together. I would go Parker, Lamb, Claypool, Rojo there. Lamb or Fuller for JGX Hoopa. I'm going to go Fuller there. Love that game. Again, as I said, I think the Titans are going to roll for 40 points, which means Fuller and those Texans are going to need to throw to keep up. Will Tonyan for Matt B. repeat and Ozzy Osbourne? Will Tonyan repeat his tight end performance? I mean, you're asking for 3 touchdowns? No. But could he keep scoring like he has in 3 straight games? Now, yeah, I think he finds the end zone. So I think if you're asking, will I be able to use him? Absolutely. Top 6 tight end for me this week. Stafford or Fitz? Oof, baby. Give me the Fitz magic against the Jets. I love the Jags matchup for Stafford too, but they just seem to always want to run the ball in an ugly fashion. My man, Corey Wilkes. Would you drop Dalton Schultz for Irv Smith Jr., Rob Tonyan's my starter? I've been thinking about that. I start Dalton, and I kind of want to drop him for Irv, or at least see what Irv does. But I also want to see, Dalton's been, tight end 5 in fantasy right now. I don't want to just drop him and send him gone. As much as I like Irv Smith as a stream, if you're not using him, I think I keep Dalton, and I'd rather see how he does with Dalton. Dalton to Dalton. You can already see it right now, right? So I think I keep Dalton Schultz there. Drake or Harris for 909 Orbits. Welcome. PPR. I got to go Drake. The Broncos, again, complete pass funnel defense. You have to pass it against them to move it. Great run D, awful secondary. So to me, that signs up for more of a James White game. Again, Harris 100 yards the last time out, but I'm going to just keep going to Drake. The Cowboys, a good matchup. So let's see him get it done. Newton or Stafford? I'm going to go Cam, Jimmy Bridges. I'm big on him coming back. Now, that's a bigger risk. If you're in like a pretty, you're going to win, you just need to have your players show up. Stafford's more likely to show up. But I really think Newton could go crazy against this Broncos team. So I go for the upside in most. Not enough spots, so Lamb or Rojo for flex. If Fournette's out, I'm leaning Rojo. Yeah, I agree. I like Rojo, especially if Fournette's out, and probably even if he is in. So he was in last time, and Ronald Jones looked great. So I'm a big fan of Ronald Jones, and I'm going to stick him in there and see what happens. I do agree with you. I always love the Monday Night Football hope. And Lamb is good enough, I think, and his skill set, dink, dunk after the catch, like in the slot, should work well with Andy Dalton. Maybe it even favors him. So that's real close. I'm leaning Ronald Jones right now, though. Might sound crazy. Lamar or Stafford. Not that crazy. We've seen Lamar playing at a pedestrian, not pedestrian, but QB 11 right now. Certainly he's not lighting any worlds on fire. But that all being said, like if I own Lamar, I'm taking the shot at his upside every week. The Eagles certainly not a scary defense to go against. A lot of man coverage too, which helps running quarterbacks. I like Lamar. I'm going to keep going Lamar despite the matchup for Stafford. You got to keep rolling your boy. Melvin Gordon ruled out. Do I start Lindsay now or Chase Edmonds? I think I'm going to lean Lindsay, the clear feature back there, 25. Edmonds, until he gets that job, it's so tough to trust. As good as he's looked and the fact that he keeps scoring, love it. But I go touches there, and I go Philip Lindsay. Charlie, appreciate you tuning in and commenting. Absolutely. Alrighty, guys, that's all we got. Little low interaction today. That's all good. I might try doing the DFS show on Friday next week. See if that gets a little more action. So thanks so much for those of you that did tune in, ask questions, and interact with us. I hope I give the $1 million takes in here and not only give them, but also use them myself. And next week when we check in, your boy's a millionaire, and this is going to be the full-time dream for us. We'll see. Always have those great fantasies every week. But I really like this Titan stack. I think it's going to be a good week for it. But those of you that tuned in, thanks so much. Best of luck. We'll be live tomorrow, 11 a.m. for all your sit starts with a fantasy tailgate. And I think we're going to debut a new show tomorrow as well. 7:40 to 8:20, right between Red Zone and the Sunday Night Football kickoff. You want football to keep going. I think we're going to be streaming live and debuting a new show. So be ready to check that out, Wolfpack. We'll pump it on up and get it ready for tomorrow. Alrighty, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Best of luck in your DFS for week 6 and your seasonal leagues. I, of course, am the Wolf of Roto Street, rotostreetjournal.com. We breed and feed fantasy wolves. Till next time.